I guess. So, Venus, why don't you explain what Singularity U is for the ad industry and media industry, and what you have to offer personally as a marketing person?
Sure. At its core, Singularity is essentially still the same goals and mission that we had when we first started way back when in 2008, which is to help leaders of any industry and any place in the world understand how to leverage exponential technologies to make the future better. Right? We fundamentally believe that anybody and everyone has a role to play in building that future, but that traditional education and professional development really fails to highlight the rate of change that is coming because of these technologies. And what we focus on better than anybody else is really that convergence point that you don't see at a lot of other organizations or institutions, where we're not just looking at one technology like artificial intelligence, but what happens when you combine artificial intelligence with, quantum computing plus like digital biology, like what opportunity does that unlock, and how will those things impact your industry, even if you can't right now see that path. So that's really what we specialize in, helping you. Not necessarily at any point in time, there's multiple futures ahead of us, but we do help you understand what those opportunities are and your role to play in helping pick the preferred future and bringing that to reality.
Okay, well, that's a great snapshot. If you don't mind, I'd like to drill into it a little bit. Um, so I love the fact that you're talking about all, I forget the word you used, about technology, not transformative, but I'm sorry.
The exponential technology.
Exponential technologies. So I think the concept of singularity originally started around transhumanism, which is a big concept, a high concept. I notice you've changed the copy that you described the organization as being, but a lot of that is still in the essence here, which is that as these technologies evolve, they integrate more with human man-machine interaction, and it's changing the way people interact with everything. Um, so from a marketer's or an ad agency's or a media publisher's point of view, I think everybody's on board with AI right now. We just came off of Cannes this week where that's all people were really talking about at the festival. Um, but to think of it more broadly, what are some of these other exponential technologies? You mentioned quantum computing. That's a high concept for a lot of people. So break it down for us.
Absolutely. I mean, artificial intelligence in general is probably the biggest, not biggest threat and opportunity to the marketing and creative and advertising industries. But outside of that, right, there's a lot of things and functionalities that we'd love for AI to do, but isn't actually possible until these other technologies kind of catch up. One of those being quantum computing. So where I don't know if anyone's watched the Black Mirror episode from 2 seasons, or I think not this season, but last season, and it was about telecom, maybe something like a Netflix, where they were able to use a quantum computer to create advanced artificial intelligence generated simulations for shows, where that's really where I think there's a lot of concern and opportunity in this market for us as marketers. It's not uncommon that we've heard this term personalization thrown around for the last decade. At least I know I have in the CPG world before I came to Singularity. What we're about to face is really that on steroids, right? And so it's not just quantum computing that would actually enable artificial intelligence to achieve what we want it to achieve from a computing standpoint. There's also things like biotech, right? And you're starting to see people do things like biome, where you get to understand your gut biome. You have the 23andMe whole controversy that's happened this year in terms of that sensitive data being potentially sold to anyone if you didn't take your account offline, which still I don't think that would have done anything. But things like that, those are another, like those biomarkers are actually also potential advertising information. And obviously we live in a world where PII, personally identifiable information, is everywhere, and your digital footprint is becoming almost inseparable from your physical self. And so once these things kind of start to merge, and we're seeing the digitization of like real life essentially right now. And all of those things are going to influence how we talk to people, how people experience their digital selves, how we can sell to them, what messages they want to hear. and just kind of transform everything about what we think we know about tech, about advertising or talking to people right now.
Well, you covered a wide swath there, including precision data, consumer data, which is super important for the health categories and all kinds of brands and marketing categories. But you also alluded to the Black Mirror episode from 2 seasons ago. And, for me, a lot of this is like life imitating art now, which is the science fiction geniuses and science writers like Ray Kurzweil foresaw this future where technology would become more integrated in a man-machine world. But and this is my thing, which is those science fiction writers like Isaac Asimov or whomever, they had rules and laws that were fiction. We don't have any of these guardrails today. This is all happening on the fly and accelerating really quickly. Does Singularity, you have any advice to marketers and brands and agencies and media in terms of moving fast and breaking things with a technology that some people think could be existential?
Yeah, absolutely.
Technology, yeah. So.
Yeah, and I think your point about science fiction is incredibly accurate. We have a strong part of our curriculum that is focused around this idea of science fiction becoming science fact. Like that is actually how it works. People write this crazy idea. Typically, there's some research involved, and then it inspires someone that's reading it to actually go out and figure out how to do it, right? And that's kind of how we've seen a lot of really incredible innovations over the past like multiple decades, like the submarine or the cell phone and things like that. It's not just I think that's where creative minds really shine. Creativity is a core part of innovation. And so for us, that's something that we really like to focus on. I think from a guardrail perspective for these different technologies, it's a huge part. We do focus a lot on ethics and how do you implement these technologies in a way that's responsible. And that's really what comes back to our mission of making the future better for everyone and not just for shareholder value. We believe that you can do both. And so I think my advice and the advice of the organization would just be find the right thought partners and really think it through. We want you to innovate. We encourage everyone to play and use these technologies and kind of get a hands-on understanding of where the world is right now. But when it comes to building solutions that have access to people's personal information, that have real lasting implications on society, we urge people to really think before doing. And one of those things, selfish plug, come to Singularity. We actually do this with organizations privately and then also at our executive program. We often do an activity called the Futures Wheel, which is something where we'll take one specific topic or we split them into groups. You get a specific topic, right? And then you have to extrapolate out every single instance. Okay, well, if this happens, what's some implications? What's the 1 step out, 2 steps out, 3 steps out? Where does this end? And typically with that activity, what we're trying to show people is that most of the time you end up in a dystopia if you keep going without like any guardrails. And so the goal for us is really not to be in a utopia or a dystopian future, but instead finding a solid middle ground where it's benefiting the most amount of people without causing as much harm as possible. That would be my suggestion, and just making sure, just because there's not governmental regulations potentially where you're playing with this technology doesn't mean you shouldn't still think and act like there is.
Yeah, I mean, there are some industry self-regulatory or at least advisory. I think you guys are one of them. There's a group called the Institute for Advertising Ethics, which is pretty new. It's only 4 or 5 years old, and it started with general principles, but they just released an AI ethics program for marketers, and they get a lot into that. And they're dealing mainly with things like deep fakes and when you should or maybe shouldn't at all use them in advertising and marketing. But coming off of Cannes this week, there was a lot of discussion about dystopian scenarios with, I'm talking mainly about AI, but everything related. And I mean, one of the sessions really focused on the impact on the labor markets, right? So every other industrial revolution we've had, from agricultural to industrial to information and web, uh, gave us time to adjust. The scenarios we're looking at right now are like within 2, 3 years, we're going to have huge displacement in labor forces. Yes, some new opportunities, but are we prepared? And specifically, I'm going to ask you for the advertising and media industry, where this is having a real world impact today. Um, what can people do to prepare their mindset for that kind of shift in labor?
Yeah. I think one of the main things is come to Singularity, selfish plug. But outside of that, honestly, it's really difficult to fully grasp the complete shift in how you need to think about building a team, doing like making an advertisement, like how do you actually disseminate a message and get across? I think starting training and reskilling yourself as soon as possible is a key goal. There is so much information out there, and unfortunately there is a lot of even misinformation out in the marketing field. I remember, many years ago when social media was kind of just getting started, and there was questions on how do we measure things, and you know what, a lot of that stuff was just kind of made up on the fly, and then was benchmarks, and that's still how we do business today, right? So I think seeing wherever you can get yourself into those rooms, understand what's being said, why it's being said, and kind of trying to apply, test, and learn as much as possible now. So that way, when that adoption period does come, you're kind of more prepared where when you don't actually have a choice whether or not you want to use these technologies. Because that I think is something that we're facing, whether or not you'll even be able to get share of voice without utilizing these technologies, without paying these different like engines for that ability to access that market. And that's not really something that we've ever seen before. There's always been breakthrough opportunities, like different ways that you could get in front of people, work around the system. You had SEO optimization, where you could just do different things to kind of hack it without having to pay money to kind of get eyeballs on things. And I think that's relatively going to change in the next 2 or 3 years. And especially like preparing yourself for what a screenless future looks like for consumers. Because I do think that that's where most of the platforms are trying to move towards, outside of, at least for Google and Microsoft with OpenAI. But you'll see it, we're about to see a clash of the platforms in terms of what their priorities are, what the consumers want, and where they want to actually be, like where the products actually want to go.
Yeah, I mean, just now the ad industry is starting to get its mind around agent to agent marketing and the idea that you're going to be targeting machines, not people, as proxies for people. Boy, there's a lot to cover. And I know we have limited time. I mean, I could go on and scenarioize and futurescape with you, but let's talk about something practical here today, which is specifically how can uh, Singularity you work with a brand or market? Do you have a good example of a case study? Is it mainly informative? I know you're a great evangelist, promoting the entity, but what are some of the practical things that you can offer brands and marketers and if there's a real world example, that would be great too.
Yeah, a lot of our work is sometimes private under NDA, but I can give generalization examples for everyone. But we have two different options of how you can engage with Singularity. The first is through open enrollment. So that's things like our executive program, where we have up to 100 leaders. We do it 3 times a year. It's really all about we just throw you into the deep end and reset your mindset. That is like the main priority for that program. We change how you think. At the end of 5 days, people are like, you're not going to be able to do that. And 90% of the time, we do actually do it. You come out thinking about the future completely differently than you did when you came in the door. And that is really, I think, is a core like building block to actually like achieve what you need to achieve. And that's industry agnostic. So you'll meet people across the board. We've had alumni in that program from top journalists. We had an editor-in-chief of a very, very large, very popular magazine that's based overseas. And then outside of that, we also have organization custom programs that will build for a specific client and to meet your specific needs. And so that's something that we've been doing almost as long as the executive program. I think we started doing custom programs in like 2010. And essentially, we'll do it anywhere. We'll come to you, you can come to us, we'll do it virtually, whatever makes sense for your organization. And we'll basically make a recommendation based off of what your problem and goal is to solve, on how best we think that you should go about doing that. And that can include anything from, for example, we worked with a company, a very large CPG company, on the future of social media. And so the goal for that was to figure out how would they actually be conversing with their customers in 2030. And so this was a few years ago that we had done that for them. And I think so far those predictions are pretty on accurate to date. So yeah, and then we help them build a strategy. We help them build a story that they can also enroll their organization in, because that's another part that we find is difficult. You can't just have innovation in a bubble or in one isolated person in order for it to actually permeate an organization and work. Everyone needs to kind of be speaking the same language. So that's kind of something that we suggest, especially for larger organizations that need top to bottom, restructuring or refiguring out how they're reconfiguring of their mindset. We'll do those different things. We can do customize like specific topic deep
Mhm.
dives for them. So if there's a specific, like for a media company or something where they are focused on advertising, right? Well, we can build a program for them that's based around generative AI, quantum computing, future vision strategy, like things where we can help them ideate, create, and understand what's actually going on in these technologies and kind of demystify some of the fear or concern that they might have around those things. So it really is truly up to the customer. We can
Mhm.
basically build almost any program for anyone. We're I think we have around there's like 80 or 90 different topic areas that we focus on under like 6 different or 9 different umbrellas of technology topics. But it's it's truly incredible to see how our curriculum team can kind of go in and help these organizations truly transform into something that will not just secure you for now, but secure your future 5, 10 years from now.
Um, yeah, we'll link to that on your site as well, so people could find it. The so it sounds to me like it's mainly professional development, continuing education, organizational culture reset, reframing how people think, less hand-holding on project development kind of things. It's
Yeah.
more educating them. Yeah.
We do more education these days than we do actual like well, I forgot what we even call these, like innovation incubators, essentially, which was something that we had done prior to COVID. After COVID, we kind of stopped doing that just because we don't have a building anymore, where we used to like bring people together and have like a maker space and everything like that. We are completely digital now. It is something that we are looking at, and occasionally we do get customers who have interest in building that functionality within their organization, in which we can act as advisors, essentially. But we don't necessarily do implementation anymore.
Well, you're living the thesis, being
Yeah.
completely virtual. By the way, Media Post was that before the COVID, but anyway. Um, well, I want to thank you for your time. I mean, like I said, I could really go down the rabbit hole on some of this. It's fun. It's important to think about. I think the most important thing, though, is it's real and it's happening now and it's accelerating fast. And I think awareness of singularity in general is acute now. And I think Singularity University is coming up more and more. So I encourage people in the ad industry to reach out and talk to you guys.
Yeah, I'm always happy to have any conversation with any advertiser or anyone in the media or social